This is a short timeline of how Somalia plunged into one of the longest civil wars in history. 1991, Said Barre, who has ruled the Horn of African nations since 1969, flees Mogadishu after the capital city is seized by rival clan militias. 1992, the effects of the war are biting. Disease and famine kill 350,000 Somalis. 1993, 2 American helicopters are shot down by Somali rebels. 18 army rangers are killed. This attack would 8 years later inspire the 2001 American film Black Hawk Down. 1994. The United States withdraws its troops from Somalia. $1.7 billion has been spent on the mission. 43 soldiers are dead and 153 wounded. 1996. Mohamed Farah Aidid rules the war-torn nation amid bitter fights between rival warlords. But his assassination leaves his son Hussein Farah Aidid in the top seat. 1999. Ethiopian forces step in to stop the fights between rebel groups. They are successful in capturing Garbahare. Year 2000. The new millennium fails to bring good tidings for the Somalis, and hundreds die of cholera. 2001. The United Nations considers withdrawing its international staff amid several attempts of kidnapping. 2002. The first connection of Al-Qaeda in Somalia is mentioned as the US suspects that fighters from the terror group could be seeking refuge in Somalia. 2003. An interim Somali government is inaugurated in Nairobi. This is the 14th attempt at putting together a central government since 1991. An earthquake hits Indonesia, and Somalia is again on the receiving end. Tsunami waves kill 300 and displaces thousands more. 2005, Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Gedi narrowly escapes an assassination attempt. 2006, the transitional government meets in Baidoa. In Mogadishu, warring militias engage in deadly battles. Hundreds of civilians are killed. The Islamic Courts Union seizes control of southern Somalia and captures Mogadishu. The Islamic government declares holy war against Ethiopia as Ethiopian troops re-enter Somalia. Thousands of Somalis flee to Kenya to escape the fighting, the drought, and the famine. Many find solace at Dadaab refugee camp. 2007. Al-Shabaab leader Hashi Airo is killed by a US airstrike. The transitional government regains control as President Abdullahi returns to Mogadishu. African Union peacekeeping troops enter Somalia to flush out Al-Shabaab militants. Somali refugees are now at 1 million. 2008. Head of UNDP is killed by gunmen in Mogadishu. Suicide bomb attacks increase as the fighting continues. The UN Security Council approves the entry of foreign warships to Somali waters to combat pirates. 2009, Ethiopia retreats from Somalia as Baidoa is captured by Al-Shabaab. 2010, Al-Shabaab pledges allegiance to Al-Qaeda. 2011, Kenyan Defense Forces launch an offensive in South Somalia. 2012, Somalia's Constituent Assembly endorses a draft constitution. 2017, the UN Security Council passes a resolution that African troops must hand over security of the country to the Somalis. In the 2 decades that Somalia has been struggling to regain stability, it is estimated that at least 500,000 people have been killed in Somalia. Millions others left as refugees since the civil war broke in 1991. While the emergence of terrorism has been detrimental to East Africa, ultimately, the Somalis have had to bear the biggest brunt. It's December 2017. Hundreds of refugees are leaving Kenya to be resettled back in Somalia. It's a bittersweet return to the place they were forced to flee decades ago. This is the 5th batch of refugees who volunteered to join the repatriation program. At least 50,000 refugees have since volunteered to be repatriated back. This batch has only 180 people. It's a slow process. Most of the refugees are unwilling to go back to Somalia before the country is completely stable. A majority have been waiting years to be resettled in foreign countries like the United States. But with the American travel ban imposed recently on Somalia, even the hope of resettlement is quickly dwindling for many. In the early 1980s, many Somalis moved to the United States in search of business, in search of better opportunities, and to also go to university. But when the Civil War broke out, many more were brought in, especially to the state of Minnesota. Today, 25,000 Somalis live in the twin cities of this state, that's St. Paul's and Minneapolis, and it's said to be the largest population of Somalis living outside of East Africa. The Somalis who immigrated here before the Civil War helped the incoming refugees settle into Minnesota. But a majority of the Somali refugees in this state were assisted by voluntary agencies.
Home of the largest Somali community in North America.
Sud Olat knows exactly what it means to be a refugee moving to America. He spent most of his life at the largest refugee camp in the world, the Dadaab refugee camp. It was a difficult life for him.
I was born the year 1991. Just that year I was born, the Somali government collapsed and there was a civil war. And we flee from Somalia and, I was born on the way to our refugee camps. And we came to Kenya and seek a refuge in their country. The thing that will stick with me forever is like, people calling you refugee, and I didn't know the word refugee even because I thought it's just I'm Kenyan and Kenya is my country. But when I was 16, 17, 15, I found out that this is not my country because I cannot move, a refugee camp size of, this city. And then, education and, lack of health, lack of, all these things, and there was no peace in Somalia. I cannot go back. At the same time, I cannot get, what I need as a human being in Kenya.
Sud was among the lucky few to get their paperwork cleared for resettlement in the US. But the shift into a completely new culture is usually the biggest challenge for those resettling here. What kind of things do you teach them, the community, once they arrive?
It's like basically I work as sometime with Catholic charities, employment case worker.
Yeah.
And then you help them to find a job, and how to dress during the interview, how to speak gently with the the interviewer, how to be successful on the job site. And people, when they get job, they will be able to support themselves and support their fellow their family. And that's how people become self-sufficient and completely control on themselves financially and become financially stable in a short period of time.
Anissa Haji is a refugee social worker. She lives in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where she assists refugees, especially women and children, to learn the American culture and to smoothly transition into the new society.
I always loved working with women and children, so it's something that makes me happy, helping other people like me.
What do you mean like you? Is it like, do you draw from some of your experiences when you were coming in here?
So when I came here, my first job was at the daycare center, where most of the mothers were like those that the government sent them to do job search, and the childcare was approved by the government, and the childcare was paid by the government. So I saw them how they struggle, and my mom has a big family. If she came to America as a refugee from Kenya, she'll probably go through all of that, and she will request public assistance, the government to help her, because she doesn't know one word of English. She speaks a little bit of Swahili, even though she lived in Kenya all her life. So it's it's comforting knowing that you're helping people from the same background like you, and it's relatable. Yeah.
Like how difficult or how easy is it for refugees when they come in? What do they have to go through?
They go through a lot, actually. So once they come in, and most of the refugees that come in here are like from like big families. They have 5, 4 kids. You know, in Africa, people have kids a lot. When they come in, they have to rent a place. They don't have a job. So what they do directly is they go to they are brought here by the other agencies like Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities, and agencies like that. But then they're told like they want to stay here. They move to another city where they have family or people they know. Like if you're from Kakuma or Hagardere, Refugee camp or Ifo, you come to Minnesota and you know that you have people from there. So they settle in, they have to rent a place. They don't have money to pay for the rent. So they rely on their friends and the government assistance. It's really difficult. They don't know one word of English. And most of the experience they have, like, you know, if they send their kids to school, the kids don't understand. And in Africa, if you fight with other kids, it's okay. But here, it's like you're being put into like detention,
You're
suspended.
problematic.
Yes, like it's normal. One of my clients I visited the other day, her daughter threw a pencil to another student. That is something serious because she could have the other kid's eye or something. And the mom didn't know. She was like, she just threw, it didn't hit. I was like, no, that is really bad. She was suspended and she was staying at home when I visited her mom. So they don't understand. They need a lot of like, you know, education on how to adapt to the American culture. And nobody is helping them that much. So they rely on other people and it's just difficult.
In Boston, Abdirahman Yusuf plays a similar role for the Somali community here. He is the executive director of the Somali Development Center.
We are a macro, you know, somebody walks into this office, they need help, maybe legal issue, immigration, housing, discrimination, family issues, you name it. And because we are bilingual and bicultural, more importantly bicultural, because if you can't understand both cultures, you can't really do anything for the clients. There's a difference between refugee, immigrant, and an asylee. There's a big difference. They all think they're all the same. They're not. Refugees are essentially people who have never planned to be here. They just found themselves to be here because there were initially refugee camps in Kenya, and the international community and the UNHCR processed them, and they were designated, okay, this is where you're going to go. So they have never planned. So many of the people do not speak English. Some of them never had any formal education. In other words, they never had planned to be here. So that was a big challenge. So getting them to learn the language, acculturation issues, how to live in a pluralistic society, a very diverse society, where you have different religions, different races, different cultures, everything.
Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Hussein Noor. In this
Former refugee Hussein Noor is trying to bridge the gap in his own little way through his YouTube channel. He has barely spent a year in the US, so he can completely relate with the challenges of fitting in.
I'm liking it so far. It has been a good experience.
How long were you at Dadaab?
I lived in Dadaab. Literally, I say I was a refugee 25 years of my life. But then specifically in Dadaab, I lived there 17 years of my life. I didn't go to anywhere, never stayed in Dadaab.
Really?
Yes.
Where did you get your education? Were you studying in Dadaab?
Yes, I did my primary school in Dadaab, and then I did my high school in Garissa. Luckily, I got sponsorship from the UNHCR, and then that was the first time ever I moved out of Dadaab. That's where I grew up. Kenya is where I grew up. That's where I know. And I couldn't move. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't go to and see friends or move around and go to see new places. Yeah.
It is one of the silent realities that only refugees would understand. Just like Sood, Hussein also struggled with identity issues.
Like, you're a grown-up man, you're going to school, you're qualified to get a job, And then you will read the qualifications and you see that you meet most of it, but at the end it just says that you should have a Kenyan ID. And it's just, that's it. You are done. You are not going to apply. Yeah. But you have to find something, some kind of, low-income jobs that you can apply.
Despite all the personal challenges of growing up as a refugee in Kenya, Hussein is still optimistic, and he uses his online platform to show the lives of ordinary immigrants in Minnesota.
Let me paste it in there, I'll tell you what it is.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's mid-morning in Minneapolis. Sood is doing his usual rounds in the neighborhood. He's brought us to Mall 24, the biggest Somali-owned shopping complex in the city.
Hi.
As an advocate for refugee rights, Sood needs to constantly be in touch with the community and to be connected to newly immigrated refugees. He says the travel ban imposed here has sent the community in a panic, and Sood's work is now even more vital.
The first Muslim ban was chaos, but thanks to the senators and lawmakers who step up, and the courts all over the country who try to speak up against the travel ban, and he changed travel ban 1, travel ban 2, things a little bit different than the first one, but still there's a chaos and fear among the community. And
thank you, brother. Yeah.
The social and political pressures for Somali immigrants are endless. But this new outspoken and fearless generation of young Somalis is changing the narrative for the community. Kenyan-born Said Haji Yusuf has also not taken a back seat. Just like his wife Anissa, Haji is vocal about issues affecting the Minnesota Somali community, and the travel ban is the most recent one.
It's discriminatory, it is a total injustice, a targeting group of countries, mostly Muslims, for this ban. And it's based on the fear that something might happen. But something happens everywhere in the world. Muslims are also victims of terrorism, whether you're in Kenya, whether you're in Somalia, whether you're in Iraq, whether you're in Syria, in Sudan, anywhere in the world. All these countries that he has fear of, our current president, Donald Trump, has fear of, all of those people are refugees for some reasons. All those people want to come to this country for some reasons, because they are victims of terrorism.
The argument has been that there are people coming in from certain countries, including Somalia, that have proven to be a bit problematic. In fact, the statistic is that for every 4 Americans who get radicalized, 1 is from Minnesota. So well, how do you justify,
reconcile that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, radicalization is not a unique thing. Radicalization is happening all over the world. Radicalization is happening in France. Radicalization is happening in the UK. Radicalization is happening in Kenya. Radicalization, forced radicalization, is happening in Somalia as a country itself. Because some of these kids that are being radicalized don't have anybody to protect them. Literally, these people go to some of these kids' home and take away these young boys at the age of 14 and 13 and 15 and force them into recruitments and force them into radicalization. Here, yes, there is a certain percentage of people that are radicalized, especially Minnesota. We've had that issue, about 20, 30 kids that have gone to different parts of the world to fight for these groups or that have been radicalized. That's there. But that doesn't make the majority.
Not many people in Minneapolis are willing to speak so openly about terrorism and radicalization. That's partly because the community feels misrepresented, especially by American media. At Mall 24, everyone wants to speak about the Kenyan politics, about who they prefer between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
Oh.
But when I bring up terrorism, no one wants to speak out. In Boston, even though the community is not as large as the one in Minneapolis, there is some organization in how the community interacts and how issues of terrorism are discussed.
The topic of terrorism and young people who have been lured and completely lost their way Because of that, we always, hold meetings for young people, and we talk to them, and we tell them always there are better ways to look after their lives. They should go to school. That's the most important thing. What Africa needs, and what the Somali community, like any community in Africa, needs, is good education. When you have good education, and then you make yourself busy, involved with education from high school to college, you hardly have any time to be distracted by these other, very bad things, you see.
We are outside the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, and it's the biggest facility in New England where Muslims can gather, congregate, pray, eat, and share ideas on how to improve the welfare of the community. And this facility was actually constructed with the help of the mayor of Boston town. Now, what's interesting is that because of such institutions, the radicalization of young men has been controlled, especially in mosques. But what now remains the biggest problem, or the biggest challenge for the community here, is online radicalization.
That's probably the biggest place where radicalization happens. And that's quite difficult to monitor. We tell parents to make sure and see what their kids are doing, even if you don't understand what's happening. If one is spending too much time alone and online and has no friends and behavioral change, to seek advice from community organizers like us or anybody else that they trust, or even their imam or somebody that they trust in the mosque. So I think people are a lot more vigilant, let's say, than they were before.
Radicalization doesn't necessarily happen in mosques and madrasas. It happens in many places that you will not even suspect. It happens, in Kenya, it might happen even in a matatu. It might happen even in a soccer field. It might happen in a stadium somewhere.
Haji is right. Radicalization is a global problem, and Kenya is still countering violent extremists, especially in poor communities. Between 2013 and 2015, Al-Shabaab went on a recruitment spree in Kenya. The year 2014 and 2015 were very difficult for the county of Mombasa. Hundreds of young men were being radicalized. Sporadic attacks were on the increase, and violent altercations with the authorities were also on the rise. Today, the issue of terrorism is spoken in harsh tones in this city, and cases are handled silently. But under that veil of silence, many say that trouble is simmering. As hundreds of Kenyan men and women crossed into Somalia to join the terror outfit, Kenya responded heavily, ridding the mosques of all radical preachers. But experts say the government failed to realize that this was only a temporary solution.
The government initially thought that when they would deal with those people who are considered the sheikhs of radicalization, Rabudu Rogo, Makaburi, Amir Khan, and the others, they thought it is over. But of course, they had an idea. And when the idea is past, the idea cannot die unless you deal with the cause of that idea. An idea continues. There are many people who you can consider disciples of that idea, and they are propagating it.
Professor Shauri has done extensive research on terrorism, radicalization, and violent extremism. He says that the late radical preacher Abu Drogo is still alive online. Young people are lured through his teachings on YouTube and driven to social sites with extreme violent messaging.
Radicalization is still going on. So long as the root cause is there, they're still going on. I said about cause and treatment. If you don't deal with the cause, then you cannot believe that when temperature has gone down, malaria has gone. So the cause is still there. The social issues, injustices we are talking about, they're still there. There's minimum address to the land question in the coast. There's been minimum address to the question of unemployment among the youth, question of education among the youth. So these are basic issues that need to be addressed. So long as they are there, radicalization will still continue.
Violent groups feed into the dissatisfaction of the youth to lure them into their groups, and the internet has become the new popular tool of radicalization. It has been especially successful in luring young Muslims in the West.
I actually have a cousin of mine. I've never seen him, but he was either born or brought to Finland by his parents, my uncle, and we just saw him on YouTube. in the middle of Raqqa or somewhere with ISIS. We don't think he's alive, but yeah, he was radicalized in Finland, and you know.
How does that make you feel, knowing that you know someone?
It makes me feel very angry, yeah, very angry. Yeah, this poor kid was speaking Finnish. He doesn't even speak Somali, and he was talking about how he's going to make Finland part of the caliphate and some stuff like that, and people, Finland Muslims, and anyway, brainwashed, totally brainwashed, and we just saw him on YouTube riding on a white horse in the middle of Raqqa before the bombing started.
When ISIS first discovered the power of online marketing, the American government quickly released similar videos to counter the narrative.
You know, this kind of goes back to your question about
Manju Sadarangani from the newly created Global Engagement Center says the US government learned that this was an ineffective strategy.
There was this attitude when ISIS first came on the scene, and they had all of these, really great splashy graphics, and they had this very gruesome, horrific way of presenting themselves. And there was so much Western media attention, but not just Western media attention. There was like a worldwide attention to what they were doing.
I'm going to play a little bit of it for you, but you should know this: it is not for children, and many adults will find it upsetting too. Afterward, we will have a discussion about it, but we will not show these images again.
The problem with this is we were so focused on these splashy products that everybody wanted to counter that, right? What is the United States government doing to counter this? Well, the thing is, the United States government, or frankly any government, standing up and saying, oh, this is bad, that doesn't necessarily work. What works is when our local partners are engaged, when communities are made more resilient, and that's what the GEC is focused on. We don't care as much about tweeting at the terrorists, because that's not where the recruitment happens. We've realized that terrorism recruitment happens offline.
This rings true to the Kenyan case. Even though the internet has played a big role in spreading terrorist propaganda, one-on-one radicalization remains the most effective way of recruitment. Professor Shauri from the Pwani University in Kilifi says their recent research shows that hundreds of young Kenyans at the coast are at risk of radicalization from their peers.
The spaces have changed, and the critical space now is the maskan. There's a research we did for Kenya and Tanzania. The title of the research is Let's Meet at the Maskan. That's where radicalization takes place. So what is maskan, if you can... Maskan is a place where young people meet, peers meet, and discuss issues, share videos, share WhatsApp communication. It's a garden. It's like a garden where young people meet and discuss interesting things in their lives, share their frustrations.
We've realized that the recruitment is happening one-on-one. It's actually happening offline. So for example, someone, watches a couple of videos and they click on them, and we find that violent extremist organizations then pay attention to this person because they're using data analytics tools, and they try to figure out what this particular individual's grievances are. And then based on that, they recruit them. So if someone is having family trouble, they'll say, come join our organization, we're like a family. If someone is upset at their local government because of governance issues, then they'll say, come join us, this is how you can solve it. If someone is, seeking a thrill and hoping to make a difference, they say, come join us, you can come make a difference and you'll be famous. So they seem to be able to target individuals based on their individual psychological, economic, psychosocial needs.
The issue of radicalization, it's there. It's a community problem. But the only way to deal with it is people to sit down with the affected communities, where it is coming from, and find solution. Not bring ideas, not bring situations where you're trying to force it out of them. It doesn't work like that.
Has anyone sat with the community here? Has anyone included the community in that conversation?
Not very much, and not very often, but that needs to be done. And the community needs to come up with the solutions themselves, not impose ideas from outside. the community need to deal with this issue because they are also victims.
It becomes very important for us that our messaging is not just what we are saying, but also what people in that community are saying. So we don't control the message, but we do give them the tools to be able to reach people well. And that is our role. You know, me saying to an individual from Kenya, for example, that you shouldn't join Al-Shabaab is not going to resonate in the same way as you speaking to them would. And this is why for us, the credible voices, the local influencers, the young leaders are very important. These are the people that are able to understand the mindset that of their communities and are therefore the best buffers against extremism. It's not us, it's them.
Part of GEC's new strategies is to reach the community online through personalized platforms. They have Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Flickr accounts to feed relevant messages to specific community in a language they can understand. But it's one thing to have this intricate plan in tackling radicalization. But what happens when the community you're trying to engage is constantly battling discrimination and alienation from the rest of the society? After the break, we go to New York, where the worst terror attack in US history happened, to find out how 9/11 changed America and how it's still a big factor in the government's fight against terrorism. We've been traveling across the US, and so far we've been in 4 states, discovering how the world's superpower is countering the global problem of terrorism and violent extremism.
25 elevators, 25 elevators, 25 elevators. So if you do the north and the west side, that's 50 elevators.
The ever-buzzing city of New York knows the devastating effects of terrorism all too well. 16 years ago, this city had to witness the one terror attack that changed the world. So each square represents every single soul.
Lost, yeah.
How many are they? Philip Caffrey was in the 69th floor of North Tower when the first plane hit one of the twin towers.
Didn't heat, an explosion, and the building shook violently. Felt like it was going to topple. Kind of shocks you a little bit, and my exposure was southerly, so I was looking out towards the Statue of Liberty, and a lot of wreckage and fiery balls went by the window. It was just a lot to take in all at once. Hung up the phone, stood up, and everybody had that look of like, what's going on? What just happened?
Today, Philip works as a volunteer guide at the 9/11 Memorial Center in the city. A few hours every week, he shows visitors at the memorial building the remnants of the building he worked in 16 years ago. Trump's administration placed this ban on certain countries. Do you feel like it makes the country safer?
Well, I don't know so much about that. You know, I think if people put their mind to it, they're going to figure out a way. Anyway, it's kind of drastic and, you know, kind of goes against everything that America is, but I don't want to get too political here.
Some 9/11 survivors like Philip don't want to get too political. But others like Wendy Lansky and William Ruff think that it's critical to get the right kind of conversation going.
You know, I think there's a whole profile of people who can be radicalized. You know, the people they go after are loners, people who don't have families, people who are disenfranchised, maybe below the poverty line. There's people that are preyed upon. And when the economy goes bad and when politics go bad, they're ripe for the picking. They're able to do that. And it's sad. And it's not any one country or any nationality. But I think you have to fight that with information.
One is aware of terrorism to a greater or lesser degree, but certainly I did become much more aware of Islamist extremism. But I think it's not so much religion, it's rather an ideology that's based on hate, destructiveness. It's an ideology that suggests that individuals will sacrifice, martyr themselves for a higher purpose. It's such a twisted perverted, subversive ideology that goes against the basic instincts of human beings, which is to live and to love and to lead a peaceful life and constructive with our families and our friends and our work.
Most governments, if not all, could do a better job, including my own. There is no one answer. And the problem is, even if you have a strategy for ISIS, there'll be some new organization tomorrow. You know, everyone was excited when we got Osama bin Laden, myself included. It was a good day for me. But it's like cancer. You know, you can't cure, if you cured one kind of cancer tomorrow, there's still 10,000 others that are there. I think what we can do a way better job at in the world is joining governments together against terrorism instead of our own agendas. Instead of saying, I'm not going to join with you because I don't like your politics. Let's fight the common enemy together. And I don't think we do a good job. And our current administration in this country thinks about everything other than things that matter.
After the 9/11 attack, the negative politics which fueled Islamophobia and negative nationalism took center stage. Many of those who spread hate messages said they did so in the name of the victims of 9/11. This negativity affected the families of the victims so much that they decided to speak out and counter the messages. A few people who lost loved ones in 9/11 decided to come together under the platform Families for a Peaceful Tomorrow. They want to promote alternative dialogue and raise public awareness on issues of war, peace, and terrorism. How many members do you have?
So we have 250 members, and not all of them are active, of course. But it's interesting because ever since we have this new government, new members have found us. So they have been quiet for 16 years, and they finally say, I cannot be quiet anymore.
Why? What's the main reason for that?
Well, I think, you know, a very powerful voice that came out of 9/11 in America was, you know, about nationalism and revenge and closing and being just America and seeing Muslims as the other. And the more you hear that and you read that in the media, if you don't have that opinion and you lost somebody on 9/11, of course you'll feel, yes.
Yeah.
You sure you don't want anything?
I'm good. Bruce Wallace is one of the members of Families for a Peaceful Tomorrow. He lost his nephew in the 9/11 attack. He invites us into his Brooklyn home to share his perspective on today's world.
On 9/11, the country was traumatized. And politicians took advantage of this trauma. And little by little, they have centralized power in the White House, okay? Our democracy is built on 3 legs, you know? You have the judiciary, you know? But now all the power is being concentrated in one place. And the executive has begun to take over. The rule of law has been diminished. People's rights have been diminished. Step by step since 9/11. At first, the people were so willing to accept this. In the shock of being attacked, America the Great, brought to its knees by a handful of people, but associated with terrorism, it made the people fearful. And the government fed on this fear, and it kept putting out more and more propaganda stories. The propaganda was so intense that when I give my lectures now, if I go away from large population centers and we give the lecture, sometimes with my wife, who is Iraqi, she's from Baghdad. If we give these lectures, sometimes in the middle of the lecture I will stop and I'll say, wait, I want you to be perfectly honest with me. No one is going to count you, I'm not taking your name. But how many of you knew before we started talking that Iraq attacked us on 9/11. And the hands go up, and they go up to this day.
Like Bruce, most members of Families for a Peaceful Tomorrow are heavily involved in lobbying for positive policies that are not detrimental to universal human rights of individuals. The sad thing about terrorism, however, is how just one event can affect multiple people across the world. Strangers whose lives are intertwined by a moment of tragedy. But after hearing all these voices, it's easy to wonder how much easier everything would be if everyone took the time to learn and understand each other's perspectives. Would it be much easier to defeat the enemy? Asha Mwilu, KTN News.